Welcome back to George's Woodshop. In this video we're going to finish off our router table build by installing the top, adding this insert and making this fence. So the top that I'm using on this router table is a prefabricated kitchen countertop. So you can get these at your hardware store in a full-size panel, but more often than not your local cabinet shop will actually have a lot of these offcuts and will offer them to you for free or at a really good price. So it always pays off to ring up and ask if they've got any offcuts they're looking to get rid of. Now on top of the countertop, I've also got a commercially available router insert, but if you haven't got access to a store that sells them, another good option is using something like a cutting board, a nylon cutting board, or a piece of acrylic. To install this insert, I'm actually just going to use my router with a pattern bit. So in order to do that, we need to make a pattern. So here I've positioned the insert so it's central on the table, but slightly set back from the front. And then we're actually going to build a template around that. So I'm going to get this piece here installed, and I'm going to use clamps on this one. And then around this piece, I'm going to use some double stick tape and just tape these scrap pieces of MDF here around the insert so there's no gaps. And so now we have this perfectly sized sort of template, if you will, for our pattern bit to ride up against. Okay, so with that recess cut and our insert fitting in that gap perfectly, now what we have to do is actually cut a through hole that will allow our router to drop all the way through. Now the fence for this router table is once again MDF, and it's just made out of that offcut we had left over from the router cabinet. However, I put that back in the rack, I forgot what it was there for, and I actually cut it up to use for something else. So I'm actually going to be using this new sheet of MDF here, so if you're following along with the plans, your process is going to be a little bit different because you'll be ripping your MDF down to width, whereas I'm actually cross-cutting. But other than that, it should be pretty much the same. Just follow the cut list and you should be right. Now, if you're using the plans, you should be left with two strips that are 110 millimeters wide by 2.4 meters long, as that's a full sheet of plywood. However, because I'm not doing that, I've actually just got 3 strips of 1.2 meters long, and that's enough for the rest of this project. So now what I'm going to do is cut 2 of these strips down to be the final length of 1050 millimeters. Now with the offcuts for you, or for me with my spare piece, I'm going to be cutting out 6 95 by 110 millimeter blocks. So for me, I just have to cross cut these at 95 millimeter increments. So I'm just marking the center of these boards so we know where to drill the hole for our router bits to be recessed into when our fence is assembled. Now, this would be the better time to use a drill press, but if you look around, I don't have a drill press anymore, so I'm just using my hand drill. So with a large bit like this, just make sure you brace the drill well and take your time, because this can grab and really come back at you. So I actually stuffed up when I said that you need 4 blocks of these, the 95 by 110, because really you only need 2, because we can cut these in half and we'll be left with our braces there, and it will probably look a little bit better. So I'm just going to cut these in half at the bandsaw. Okay, so this is all the components for our fence minus the 2 front faces here. So these long pieces just flip up to form the L shape or the square, and then these corner brackets we made just fill in the gaps like that. To get our braces in place, or these corner blocks, whatever you want to call them, we need to make sure that these are referenced really well against the 2 faces, because these are dead square and we want our fence to be dead square. So what I've made is these little corner blocks here, and this will go on the outside of the fence like so. This will obviously go on the inside, and what that gives us is these 2 parallel faces for our clamp to apply pressure. So yeah, that's working really well, so we've got good squeeze out of that glue there, so I'm happy with the way this is working. Okay, so that there is really a completed fence. You could leave it here and it would be perfectly fine for most applications. I mean, it's nice and straight, it's perfectly square, and with a few clamps holding this onto the table, it'll be nice and rigid too. However, we can go a few steps further and improve the sort of overall design of this fence by adding a bit of dust collection and some faces on this, which we can adjust the gap and do either jointing applications or just have optimum airflow for our dust collection and good support for our workpiece. Now, the dust collection on this is as simple as a piece of MDF which is cut to the same diameter as this gap here, so between these two braces, and with a hole cut in the middle of it. So all we do is we glue that in place, add a few brad nails, and then here using a bit of 50mm, what's this stuff called again? 50mm PVC, we can just shove that in that gap, and that is how we will attach our hose. So all we're going to do there, apply some glue, brad nails, and attach this pipe. The other thing that we can add to this fence to make it work that little bit better for us is these two faces here. So these go on the outside of the fence, and the function of these is, well, obviously as the melamine is nice and slick, it will give us a nice durable sort of face to our fence and make it last that much longer. But also we can slide these open or shut, and that will give us one, good airflow for our dust collection, so no more gap than is needed, but also give us good support around our workpiece, and that's sort of the most important thing. So if we're using a straight cutting bit, we close this so it's almost touching, and then we have plenty of support around the sort of cutting edge of the tools and hopefully minimize any chip out that could occur on a long grain cut. Now, cutting these slots is pretty simple. All it is using your new router table with the fence in its current sort of state and two router bits, so two straight cutting router bits. One is about a 6mm bit, or about, I think that's about 1/4 inch, and the other is a 19mm bit, which is about 3/4 of an inch. And to do it, you just take it in a few passes. You mark the locations you want to cut on the ends of your boards. You mark the location of the router bit on the table so you can see where to start and stop. And you just slowly, using your fence as a reference, slowly lower the workpiece onto the router bit, pull it through until you hit your stop mark on the table, lift it up, obviously do that for all 4 slots, raise the router bit up, and then plunge all the way through and finish your slot. And then it's just the same procedure for the larger diameter bit. Don't move your fence, and instead of going all the way through, you just go deep enough to hide the head of your bolts that you're using. The last thing you need to do is just drill these through holes in the actual fence itself, which will accept your bolts. Now, these aren't actually the bolts I'm using. I'm waiting on mine to come in. They're the standard T-bolts. But what you want to do is you want to close your gap so it's nice and central. And then using your drill bit, you drill through at the furthest away point in both of those slots. So that will make sure that every time you close these, you're closing to dead center, and you'll have a nice router bit, a nice flat fence. Use washers in these, and on the back, either use something like a T-nut or an actual knob that you can buy at any woodworking store. Now, like I said, I'm waiting on the hardware to come in, so I can't actually finish this to my final product, but for now, these bolts will do just fine. However, I haven't got any washers for them, so that's kind of a bit of a bummer. So that's pretty much the router table finished. So I am waiting on a little bit of hardware so I can actually properly install these two sliding fences here, or sliding faces, but really that is it done. So there was a few things I did which I didn't show in the video. Now, obviously the first thing, I reassembled the entire case, so I attached the doors and I added this drawer front, and to do this I just used brad nails, and that is perfectly fine for my needs. And the other thing I did was, to this cabinet, I cut out a 4-inch dust port and attached a bit of dust collection, and this works really well. Now, the other thing I did, which I didn't show because it's different for every router, is I actually attached the router to the plate, and I actually had to use custom holes because my plate didn't fit on this particular model. So I used one of my base plate attachments, and I just tried to line it up as central as possible. And then using the holes which existed in the plate here, I drilled through, countersunk the holes and attached the plate, and that's worked just fine. Last thing I did, which I didn't really show in that much detail, was leveled this plate. So this router plate has these 4 grub screws in the corners, which you can use to level this router plate. However, because this is going into a substrate of chipboard, I actually marked the location of each of these grub screws and added a metal screw into the chipboard. So instead of these the grub screw is hitting chipboard and sinking in over time, it's hitting metal and should stay nice and level. So if you're not using a commercial router plate like this one, you can just use those screws to level it instead. So you just screw one in a bit more than the other. So that's why we plunge down deeper than the depth of our router plate insert. Now there was another fairly big detail that I didn't include in this build, and that is wiring up an external switch, because in Australia there's some really strict laws about who can and can't do electrical work, and if you're found out to be doing your own electrical work, you can actually face some pretty big fines, and it's not really something I want to be responsible for. So I've actually ordered a commercially available external switch, which I'm going to mount on the wall behind me so I have nice clear access to that, and it's all in line so I don't need to cut anything or custom wire anything. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you click that thumbs up button and leave a comment below. And on top of that, if you want to help support the show and maybe get the set of plans for this router table, you can do that at my website. So head over to georgeswoodshop.com, click on the store, and you'll be able to download these plans and help me keep the power on. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.